A midnight phone call, a woman sobbing alone on her bathroom floor, an uncle she never knew existed. And yet, something about 11,247 handwritten letters would change her life forever. Little did she know that inheritance of love from a stranger would become the foundation for hope she never expected. This is the story of how a man who died loving from a distance saved a woman drowning in debt, and how that love would ripple across generations. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. The sound hit first, not crying. Something worse. The gasping, strangled sound of someone trying to breathe through a panic attack so severe it felt like drowning on dry land. It was the kind of sound that made your chest tighten, the kind that spoke of something breaking beyond repair. Grace Holloway sat on the bathroom floor of her cramped studio apartment in Capitol Hill, Seattle. She was 29 years old, pressed into the corner between the toilet and the wall, knees pulled to her chest, phone screen glowing in the darkness like a beacon of every failure she'd accumulated. It was November 8th, 2024, 11:47 p.m., and her life was ending. The email stared back at her. Subject: Final notice, account past due. Your student loan payment of $847 is now 90 days overdue. Your account has been referred to collections. Your credit score has been negatively impacted. Immediate payment required to avoid legal action. But that wasn't the only email. The screen was full of them. Rent payment declined. Insufficient funds. Your insurance has been canceled. Final disconnection notice. Electricity. Your card ending in 4392 has been declined. Grace's hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped the phone. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. The walls of the tiny bathroom seemed to be closing in, getting smaller with each failed inhale. She had a master's degree in social work. She worked 50 hours a week at a nonprofit helping homeless youth in Seattle. She showed up every day, smiled at her coworkers, counseled teenagers about building better futures. And she couldn't afford to live. The math was brutally simple. Rent: $1,850 for 400 square feet in a building with no elevator. Student loans: $847. Car payment: $380. Insurance: $215. Phone: $85. Groceries: whatever was left, which was usually nothing. Her salary after taxes: $3,200 a month. She was $400 short every single month, and it had been compounding for 3 years. Grace pulled up her banking app even though she knew what she'd see. Checking: negative $127.43. Savings: 0.00. Her vision blurred. The panic attack intensified. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Her phone rang. Unknown number, 11:52 p.m. on a Tuesday night. She almost didn't answer. Who called at midnight with good news? But something made her thumb swipe across the screen. Hello? Her voice was barely a whisper, raw and broken. The voice on the other end was male, older, professional but gentle. Is this Grace Holloway? Who's asking? She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing tears across her cheek. My name is Richard Castellano. I'm an attorney in Portland, Oregon. I'm calling about your uncle, Daniel Holloway. Grace's chest tightened further, if that was even possible. I don't have an Uncle Daniel. Actually, you do. Or you did. Mr. Holloway passed away 6 days ago. I'm the executor of his estate, and you're listed as his sole beneficiary. The words didn't make sense. They floated in the air like something from a dream, disconnected from reality. I'm sorry, but you have the wrong person. My father was an only child. I don't have any uncles. Ms. Holloway. Richard's voice took on a strange tenderness. Your father, Thomas Holloway, had an older half-brother, Daniel. They were estranged for over 40 years. But before Daniel died, he left very specific instructions. You inherit everything: his house, his savings, and something else. Something he spent the last 30 years creating specifically for you. Grace's panic attack paused, not because she felt better, but because her brain was too confused to maintain the terror. I don't understand, she said. I know this is shocking. But Ms. Holloway, your uncle left you $2.7 million. The house alone is worth $1.9 million, and he left you a series of letters. 11,247 letters, to be exact. One for every day since your father cut contact with him. Every single one addressed to you. The bathroom spun. The phone nearly slipped from Grace's hand. $2.7 million, the number that could solve every problem. Erase every red notice. Let her finally breathe. People think poverty in America looks a certain way. They think it's the people sleeping on sidewalks, holding cardboard signs, visibly struggling. But there's another kind. The invisible kind. The people who show up to work every day in professional clothes, who smile and pay for coffee with cards they hope won't decline, who slowly, quietly drown in debt nobody talks about. Grace Holloway was the second kind. The next morning, Grace sat in her tiny office at Compass Youth Services, a nonprofit serving homeless teenagers in Seattle. She was the senior case manager. She wore the same 3 blazers in rotation, carefully rotating them so nobody noticed. She brought lunch from home, usually peanut butter sandwiches, because she couldn't afford the food trucks that lined the street outside. She sat across from Marcus, a 17-year-old homeless teen who'd aged out of foster care 3 months ago. He slouched in his chair, hoodie pulled up, eyes tired in the way that came from sleeping in shelters and trying to stay invisible. "So Marcus, how'd the job interview go?" Grace asked, her voice professional, warm. "They said they'd call." Marcus shrugged. "They won't. Hey, don't give up yet. Remember what we talked about? Persistence is how you build a future," Marcus finished with a slight smile. "I know, Grace. You've said it like 100 times. Then say it 101, Grace said gently, because it's true." What Marcus didn't know was that Grace's electricity had been shut off that morning, that she'd showered at the 24-hour gym before work, that the professional blazer she was wearing had a stain she'd covered with a strategically placed name tag, that every single thing she told him about persistence and building a future felt like a lie when she was drowning herself. After Marcus left, her coworker Jennifer appeared in the doorway. Jennifer was 35, energetic, perpetually optimistic in a way that used to inspire Grace, and now just exhausted her. "Hey, we're ordering lunch from that Thai place down the street. Want in?" Grace's stomach growled audibly. She hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. "I'm good. Brought lunch." Jennifer eyed the same Tupperware container Grace brought every day. "Grace, when's the last time you splurged on something? Like, anything?" "I'm saving money," Grace said with a practiced smile. It wasn't technically a lie. She was trying to save. Failing catastrophically, but trying. After Jennifer left, Grace pulled out her phone. The email from Richard Castellano was still there. She'd read it 17 times since midnight, trying to convince herself it was real. She opened a new browser tab and searched, Daniel Holloway, Portland, Oregon obituary. The results loaded, and there he was. Daniel James Holloway, 1954-2024. Beloved teacher, mentor, friend. Retired high school English teacher who touched countless lives. Preceded in death by his wife, Margaret, 2019. Survived by his niece, Grace Holloway of Seattle, Washington. There was a photo. A man with kind eyes and silver hair, wearing a cardigan sweater. He looked like someone's favorite teacher. He looked like he could have been family. But Grace had never seen his face before yesterday. She scrolled through the comments on the obituary. "Mr. Holloway changed my life. He was the only teacher who believed in me. He stayed after school every day to help struggling students. Never asked for anything in return. The world lost a truly good man." Grace felt something twist in her chest. Grief, maybe. But also anger, confusion, betrayal. Why didn't her father ever mention him? Why had Daniel been erased from their family like he never existed? Her phone rang. Richard Castellano. "Ms. Holloway, I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to come to Portland. There are documents to sign, legal matters to handle. And Daniel left very specific instructions that you need to read the letters in person, in his house." Grace looked around her tiny office, at the stack of case files on her desk, at the calendar showing she had 3 more client appointments scheduled for today, 5 tomorrow, a full week ahead. I can't just leave. I have work. I have clients who depend on me. Ms. Holloway? Richard's voice was gentle but firm. When was the last time someone depended on you, and you actually had the resources to help them? The question landed like a physical blow. You have paid time off for family emergencies, don't you? This is a family emergency. Your uncle just died. Please, Grace, come to Portland. Come home. 2 hours later, Grace was on I-5 South, driving toward Portland in her 2011 Toyota Corolla. The car made concerning noises it had made for 6 months now, mechanical complaints she couldn't afford to fix. The check engine light had been on so long she didn't even see it anymore. There's a specific kind of terror that comes with unexpected money. Not lottery-winning money, inheritance money. Because somewhere in the back of your mind you know this. Someone had to die for you to breathe again. Someone you never met had to stop existing for your problems to be solved. And that guilt sits in your chest like a stone. Grace's phone sat in the cup holder, GPS directing her to 847 Maple Street, Portland, Oregon. Daniel's house. Her house now, apparently. She passed the Seattle city limits, then Tacoma, then Olympia. Each mile took her further from the life she knew and closer to. What? A dead uncle's house? A mystery she didn't ask for? Her phone buzzed. Text from Jennifer. Emergency leave approved. Take care of yourself. Heart emoji. Another text. This one from her landlord. Rent check bounced again. Need payment by Friday or starting eviction process. Grace's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Friday was 3 days away. Even if the inheritance was real, there was no way the legal process moved that fast. She'd be homeless before she ever saw $1 of Daniel's money. She pulled up her banking app at a red light. Checking. Negative $247.80. She'd somehow gone more negative overnight. Overdraft fees. The bank was literally charging her money for not having money. Her vision blurred. Not from a panic attack this time, but from exhaustion. She was so tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of smiling through poverty. Tired of helping everyone else while drowning herself. The GPS announced, "You have arrived at your destination." Grace looked up. The house sat on a tree-lined street in a quiet Portland neighborhood. It was a craftsman bungalow, probably built in the 1920s, with a wide front porch, dormers, and a garden that was slightly overgrown but still beautiful. The kind of house people saved their entire lives to afford. The kind of house Grace never imagined she'd even visit, let alone inherit. She parked on the street and just sat there for a full minute, staring. A man appeared on the porch. 50s, gray suit, kind face, Richard Castellano. He waved. Grace forced herself to get out of the car. "Ms. Holloway," Richard said, extending his hand as Grace climbed the porch steps. "Thank you for coming." "This still doesn't feel real," Grace said, shaking his hand. Her hand trembled slightly. "I understand. But it is real. Every bit of it." Richard produced a key from his pocket, old brass, worn smooth from years of use. "Before we go inside, I need to tell you some things. Things Daniel wanted you to know." Grace nodded, unable to speak. "Your Uncle Daniel and your father Thomas were half-brothers. Same mother, different fathers. They were close as children. But when Daniel was 22, he came out as gay. This was 1976, Ms. Holloway. Your grandfather didn't take it well." Grace's chest tightened. She knew where this was going. Your grandfather gave Thomas an ultimatum. Cut Daniel out of the family completely, or lose his inheritance. Thomas was 19, about to start college, and he chose the money. He cut Daniel out of his life, and he never spoke to him again. The words settled like frost on Grace's skin. Daniel tried for years to reconnect. He wrote letters, showed up at family events uninvited, called on holidays. Thomas refused to acknowledge him. When you were born in 1995, Daniel sent gifts, every birthday, every Christmas. All of them were returned unopened. Grace felt tears building behind her eyes. My dad never told me any of this. No, Richard said gently. He didn't. But Daniel never stopped trying. When your father died 3 years ago. Grace's breath caught. How did you know when my dad died? Daniel knew. He'd been keeping track of Thomas's life from a distance for 40 years. When he learned Thomas had passed away from a heart attack at age 48, he tried to contact you directly. But by then, you'd moved, changed your phone number. He couldn't find you. So he did something else. The letters, Grace whispered. Every single day for 30 years, Daniel sat down and wrote you a letter. Sometimes about his day. Sometimes about what he wished he could tell you. Sometimes just sharing the things he thought a niece should know. He never intended to send them. He just needed you to exist in his life somehow. Richard pulled out his phone and showed Grace a photo. Daniel's study, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. And on every shelf, boxes and boxes of handwritten envelopes. 11,247 letters. He organized them by year, dated every one, and in his will, he left very specific instructions. You are to read them in order in this house. Take as long as you need, and when you're done, everything here is yours. Grace couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They spilled down her cheeks, hot and fast. Why? Why would he do all this for someone who never even knew he existed? Richard's eyes grew misty. Because he loved you, Grace. He loved Thomas, even after everything. And he loved you because you were part of Thomas. Family wasn't about who stayed. It was about who you chose to keep loving, even when they left. He placed the key in Grace's palm. It was still warm from his hand. There's something else. Daniel was a teacher for 42 years. He lived modestly, saved aggressively, invested wisely. The $2.7 million is real. The house is paid off. And there's a letter on the kitchen table he wrote 2 weeks before he died. Specifically for today. The day you'd finally come home. Grace stared at the key in her hand. This small piece of metal that represented everything she didn't know she'd lost and was somehow getting back. I'll leave you alone, Richard said. But I'm a phone call away if you need anything. Take your time, Grace. This is your house now, your inheritance, your story. He walked to his car and drove away, leaving Grace standing on the porch of a house that belonged to a stranger who had loved her from a distance for her entire life. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house smelled like old books and lemon furniture polish. Everything was immaculately maintained but clearly lived in. Comfortable furniture, worn oriental rugs, built-in bookshelves lining every wall. Photographs covered every surface. Grace walked slowly through the living room. The photos stopped her in her tracks. Daniel at a high school graduation ceremony, surrounded by students in caps and gowns. Daniel with a beautiful woman with dark hair and warm eyes. Margaret, his wife, Grace assumed. Daniel at pride parades across different decades, his smile growing more confident in each photo. Daniel in a classroom, gesturing at a chalkboard. Daniel reading, laughing, living. A full, rich, beautiful life. One that should have included her father. Should have included her. And then, on the mantel, something that made Grace's breath stop entirely. A framed photograph of her. School picture day, probably 2nd grade. She was missing her front teeth, wearing an oversized sweater her mom had bought at Goodwill. She had no memory of this photo being taken, and she certainly hadn't given it to Daniel. But he had it, framed, in the center of his mantel, like the most important thing in the house. Next to it, her high school graduation announcement, her college acceptance letter to the University of Washington, a newspaper clipping from when she received her master's degree in social work. How did he get these? How long had he been collecting pieces of her life? He'd been watching, following her from a distance, building a relationship with a niece who didn't know he existed. Grace felt her knees give out. She sank onto the couch and let herself sob. Not delicate tears. The ugly kind. The kind that came from a place so deep you didn't know it existed until it broke open. When she could finally breathe again, she made her way to the kitchen. And there, on the wooden table, exactly where Richard said it would be, was an envelope. Cream-colored, heavy stock. Her name written on the front in elegant cursive. Grace Holloway. She sat down, took a breath, opened it. The letter inside was several pages, handwritten on lined paper. My dear Grace, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've finally come home. I've imagined this moment 10,000 times, wondered what you'd look like, how you'd sound, whether you'd be angry or sad or confused. Probably all three. Let me start with the truth. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you grew up without knowing me. I'm sorry your father made the choice he made, and I'm sorry that choice hurt both of us. I'm sorry I couldn't be at your birthday parties, your graduations, your hard days when you needed an adult who understood. But here's what I'm not sorry for. I'm not sorry I never stopped loving you. When your father cut me out of his life in 1976, I was 22 years old and terrified. Being gay in that era meant losing everything. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet, stayed away, gave him space, eventually he'd forgive me. But he never did. Not in 48 years. The day you were born, September 14th, 1995, I found out from your grandmother. She called me in secret, breaking your grandfather's rules one last time before she passed away. She told me Thomas had a daughter. You. And she told me your name. Grace. I hung up the phone and cried for an hour. Not just because I was sad, though I was, but because somewhere in the world, my baby brother had created something beautiful, and I would never get to know you. So I made a choice. I would love you anyway. Every single day for 30 years, I sat at this kitchen table, the one you're probably sitting at right now, and I wrote to you. I told you about my students, my wife Margaret, the books I thought you'd love, the lessons I wished I could teach you. I wrote about coming out and what it cost me. I wrote about Margaret's death from cancer and how it nearly destroyed me. I wrote about the small joys that kept me going. A student's breakthrough, a perfect cup of coffee, the way sunlight looked through these kitchen windows in the morning. I filled 11,247 letters with a life I wanted to share with you. And now, Grace, it's all yours. Not just the letters, the house, the money, everything I built. Because here's what I learned in 70 years. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice. And I chose you, Grace. Every single day, I chose you. Your father made his choice 40 years ago. But that doesn't define you. You get to choose who you become, who you love, what kind of life you build. I'm leaving you everything because I want you to have what I had. Freedom, security, the ability to help others without destroying yourself in the process. I know you work with homeless youth. I've been following your career. I'm so proud of you. But Grace, please, use this money to save yourself first. You can't pour from an empty cup. Let yourself breathe. One last thing. In my study upstairs, there's a leather-bound journal on my desk. It contains instructions for everything you need to know. Bank accounts, investment information, contact information for my financial advisor. Richard will help you with the legal process, but that journal has the practical details. And Grace, if you're reading this, I need you to know. You were never a burden. You were never forgotten. You were loved, desperately and completely, every single day of your life. Welcome home, sweetheart. Love always. Uncle Daniel. Grace read the letter 3 times, then 4. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't the same tears as before. These were different, softer, mixed with something that felt almost like hope. She sat there in Daniel's kitchen for over an hour, just breathing, letting the weight of the past 24 hours sink in. A man she'd never met had loved her from a distance her entire life, had watched her grow up through newspaper clippings and distant observation, had chosen her, day after day, even when she didn't know he existed. Her phone buzzed. Text from her landlord. "Grace, I'm serious. Payment by Friday or I'm filing eviction papers." She stared at the text for a long moment. Then she typed back, "I'll have a cashier's check for full payment plus late fees by Friday. I apologize for the inconvenience." She didn't know if that was true, but for the first time in 3 years, she had something she hadn't had before. Hope. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't drown after all. Grace stood up and made her way to Daniel's study. It was on the second floor, a small room with a window overlooking the garden. The walls were lined with books. A mahogany desk sat in the center, and on every available surface, boxes and boxes of letters. She picked up one box at random. 1995. The year she was born. The envelopes were organized by date, each one labeled with the day it was written. September 15th, 1995. September 16th, 1995. September 17th, 1995. Grace opened the first one, dated the day after she was born. "Dear Grace, you're 1 day old today. I'll never meet you, but I already love you. Your grandmother told me you weighed 7 pounds, 3 ounces, that you have dark hair like your father, that your mother cried when she first held you. I wish I could have been there. I wish I could hold you and tell you that you're going to be okay, that the world is complicated but full of beautiful things, that you're loved by people you don't even know yet. Since I can't be there, I'll write to you instead, every day, for as long as I live. Welcome to the world, Grace. I'm so glad you're here. Love. Uncle Daniel." Grace sank into Daniel's desk chair and cried. But this time, they were healing tears. The kind that washed away years of loneliness she hadn't even known she was carrying. Over the next 3 days, Grace barely left the house. She called Richard, who walked her through the basics of the estate. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, life insurance policies. The numbers were staggering. $2.7 million. Real money. Life-changing money. Richard arranged for expedited processing of the estate. Normally it would take months, but Daniel had prepared everything meticulously. Within a week, Grace would have access to the accounts. But the money wasn't what consumed her. It was the letters. She read them chronologically, starting from the day she was born. Daniel's handwriting was neat, practiced, the penmanship of a lifelong teacher. He wrote about everything: his students, his marriage to Margaret, the challenges of being a gay man in small-town Oregon in the 1980s and 90s, his grief when Margaret died, his pride in watching Grace from a distance. He'd attended her elementary school graduation, sitting in the back row where no one would notice. He'd been at her high school graduation, standing outside the auditorium with binoculars. He'd driven to Seattle when she started college, just to see the campus where his niece was studying. Every milestone, he'd been there, invisible, loving her from the shadows because that was all he was allowed to do. Dear Grace, June 3rd, 2010, age 14. I drove past your middle school today. I know, it sounds creepy. But I just wanted to see the building where you spend your days. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching kids stream out at 3:15. I didn't see you, probably for the best, but I imagined what you might be like. Are you shy or outgoing? Do you have lots of friends or just a few close ones? Do you love school or count the minutes until you can leave? I hope you're happy, Grace. That's all I've ever wanted for you. The letters continued, year after year, a chronicle of a man who refused to give up on someone who didn't know he was there. Dear Grace, March 17th, 2018, age 22. You graduated with your master's degree in social work today. I saw the announcement in the University of Washington newsletter. Social work. Grace, I'm so proud of you. You chose a field that's about helping others, about standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. That's what family should do. Stand up, stand by, stay. Your father didn't do that for me, but I'm trying to do it for you, even if you'll never know. On the fourth day, Grace found a letter that broke her completely. It was dated December 25th, 2021, 3 years ago. Her father had been dead for 6 months by then. Dear Grace, it's Christmas. You're alone, aren't you? I can tell. I drove past your apartment building yesterday. That sounds worse than it is, I promise. Your lights were on at 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Nobody visiting. No car in your spot except yours. I wanted so badly to knock on your door, to tell you I exist, that you have family, that you don't have to be alone. But I was afraid you'd hate me, afraid you'd blame me for the estrangement with Thomas, afraid I'd cause you more pain. So I didn't knock. I just drove home and wrote you this letter instead. Grace, wherever you are, whatever you're feeling, you're loved. You're not forgotten. And one day, when I'm gone and you finally learn the truth, I hope you'll understand that I was always there, always watching, always caring. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Grace sobbed into her hands. That Christmas, she had been alone, completely alone. She'd eaten microwaved mac and cheese and cried herself to sleep, wondering why her life felt so empty. And Daniel had been there, right outside, too afraid to reach out. She continued reading through the boxes, through the years, watching Daniel's life unfold one day at a time. He wrote about his students with such love and pride. He wrote about retirement, about the loneliness that followed Margaret's death, about his failing health in his final year. The last letter was dated October 27, 2024, 11 days before he died. Dear Grace, I'm dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctor says I have maybe 3 weeks left. I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm terrified I'll never meet you. Richard keeps telling me to reach out while I'm still alive, to find you, to introduce myself. But I can't. What if you hate me? What if knowing about me causes you pain? What if I ruin the idea of your father that you've carried all these years? So I'm doing this the coward's way. I'm leaving you everything in my will. The house, the money, these letters. When I'm gone, you'll finally know I existed. You'll know you were loved. And maybe that's enough. If you're reading this, Grace, please know. My only regret in 70 years is that I never got to meet you. But I've loved you every single day since you were born. And that love doesn't end just because I'm gone. You're going to do amazing things with your life. I know you will. Be brave, Grace. Be kind. And know that somewhere your Uncle Daniel is proud of you. Love always. Uncle Daniel. Grace sat on the floor of Daniel's study, surrounded by boxes of letters, and cried until she couldn't breathe. This man, this beautiful, kind, heartbroken man, had loved her for 30 years and never asked for anything in return. Her phone rang. It was Richard Castellano. Grace, the expedited processing came through. The accounts are unfrozen. You have full access to everything as of this morning. Grace wiped her face. Thank you, Richard. How are you holding up? Grace's voice broke. I've been reading the letters. All of them. All of them? Richard sounded surprised. There are over 11,000. I read them all, Grace said. Every single one. It took me 4 days, but I read them all. Silence on the other end of the line. Then Richard's voice thick with emotion. What Daniel did for you, writing those letters every day for 30 years. That's the purest form of love I've ever witnessed. I wish I'd known him, Grace whispered. I wish I'd had the chance. He knew that, and he chose to love you anyway. That's what makes it extraordinary. After she hung up with Richard, Grace sat in Daniel's study for another hour, just thinking. About her father, who'd chosen money over his brother. About Daniel, who'd chosen love over bitterness. About herself, and what kind of person she wanted to be. Her phone buzzed. Email notification. She opened it. Your wire transfer of $450,000 has been completed to your checking account. Available balance, 449th, 872, 57. Grace stared at the number. Richard had transferred some of the liquid assets to her personal account, so she could handle immediate expenses. $450,000. More money than she'd ever imagined having. She opened her banking app. For the first time in 3 years, the number was positive. Overwhelmingly, impossibly positive. She paid her rent, 6 months in advance, paid off her student loans entirely, all $63,000 of them, paid off her car, paid every single bill that had been haunting her. And after all of that, she still had over $350,000 sitting in her account. She could breathe. For the first time in years, she could actually breathe. But the money wasn't what healed her. It was the letters. Knowing that someone had seen her, had loved her, had believed in her every single day, even when she was drowning. Grace spent 2 more weeks in Portland, reading and rereading Daniel's letters, walking through his life, understanding who he was. She met some of his former students, who all had stories about how Mr. Holloway had changed their lives. "He believed in me when nobody else did," one student told her. "I was a gay kid in a conservative school in 1998. I thought I'd have to hide forever. Mr. Holloway pulled me aside after class one day and just said, 'You're going to be okay. The world is changing, and you're exactly who you're supposed to be.' That conversation saved my life. Story after story. Daniel had touched hundreds of lives, had been the adult dozens of kids needed when their own families failed them. And Grace understood. Daniel had loved her the same way he loved his students, unconditionally, without expecting anything in return. Just pure, selfless love. 3 weeks after arriving in Portland, Grace made a decision. She wasn't going back to Seattle. Not permanently. She called her supervisor at Compass Youth Services. "I need to resign," she said. "I know it's sudden, but I need to do something different." "Grace, are you okay?" Her supervisor sounded genuinely concerned. 6 months later, Grace Holloway stood in what used to be Daniel's study. The boxes of letters were still there, carefully preserved. But now the room had a new purpose. The Holloway Foundation for LGBTQ+ Youth. Grace had used part of her inheritance to create a nonprofit that provided housing assistance, mental health support, and educational scholarships for LGBTQ+ young people who'd been rejected by their families. She'd partnered with local schools, created a mentorship program, hired a small staff. The foundation was already helping 15 kids, with plans to expand. On the wall was a photo of Daniel, surrounded by his students, smiling that warm, patient smile. Underneath, a plaque. In memory of Daniel Holloway, who taught us that family is not who we're born to, but who chooses to love us anyway. Grace's phone rang. It was one of the kids from the program, a 16-year-old trans boy named Alex whose parents had kicked him out. "Grace? I got into the apartment. I move in next week." "That's amazing, Alex," Grace said, genuine joy in her voice. Alex's voice cracked. "Thank you. Nobody's ever done anything like this for me before." "Someone did it for me once," Grace said softly. "I'm just passing it forward." After she hung up, Grace sat at what used to be Daniel's desk and pulled out a journal. She'd started writing her own letters. Not to anyone specific. Just to the universe. Just to document the life she was building with the inheritance Daniel left her. "Dear Uncle Daniel," she wrote, "It's been 6 months since I learned you existed. 6 months since I read your first letter. And I want you to know, you saved me. Not just with the money, though that helped, but with the letters. With the proof that I was loved when I thought I was completely alone. I'm trying to be the person you saw in me. I'm trying to love the way you loved, unconditionally, selflessly, without expecting anything in return. The foundation is growing. We're helping kids who've been rejected by their families, just like you were rejected by ours. And every time I see a kid's face when they realize someone actually cares about them, I think of you. I think about how you sat in this exact spot, writing to a niece you'd never meet, just because you loved her. That's the kind of person I want to be. I wish I'd known you, Uncle Daniel. I wish I'd had the chance to tell you in person what your love meant to me. But maybe this is how you wanted it. Maybe you knew that your letters would speak louder than any conversation we could have had. So I'm going to keep reading them. Keep learning from them. Keep trying to live up to the person you believed I could be. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for never giving up. Thank you for loving me when I didn't even know I needed it. I love you too, Uncle Daniel, always. Grace. She closed the journal and looked around the study, at the bookshelves full of Daniel's favorite novels, at the window overlooking the garden where he used to sit and grade papers. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She went downstairs and opened it to find a delivery person with a package. Grace Holloway? That's me. Sign here. The delivery person handed her a thick manila envelope. Grace closed the door and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from Richard Castellano and another envelope. This one old, yellowed with age. The letter from Richard said, Grace, I found this in Daniel's safe deposit box. He left instructions that you should receive it 1 year after his death. But given everything that's happened, I thought you should have it now. Grace opened the second envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph she'd never seen before. A young man, maybe 22, with dark hair and bright eyes, standing next to a teenager who looked just like him. Daniel and Thomas, brothers. Before the estrangement, before the ultimatum, before everything fell apart. They had their arms around each other, smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. And on the back of the photo, in Daniel's handwriting, this is who we were before the world told us we couldn't be brothers anymore. Grace, if you're reading this, please know, I never stopped loving him, and I never stopped hoping that one day love would bring us back together. It didn't happen in life. But maybe, through you, it can happen in death. Keep loving, Grace. It's the only thing that lasts. Grace sank onto the couch, clutching the photograph, and cried. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. Gratitude for a man she never met who loved her anyway. Gratitude for letters that saved her when she was drowning. Gratitude for a second chance at a life worth living. And as she sat there in Daniel's house, her house, Grace understood something fundamental. Real family doesn't abandon you when life gets hard. Real family chooses you every single day, even when you don't know they're there. Daniel had chosen her, every day for 30 years. And now it was her turn to choose others, to be the person someone needed, the way Daniel had been the person she needed. That's what family does. It shows up, it stays, it loves, even from a distance, even in silence, even when it costs everything. 1 year after Grace first arrived in Portland, the Holloway Foundation was thriving. They'd helped over 50 kids. The foundation had a waiting list. Local news had done a story about Grace and Daniel's letters, and donations were pouring in from across the country. But Grace still felt like something was missing. She'd built Daniel's legacy. She'd helped dozens of kids. She'd created something meaningful and lasting. And yet, late at night, when the house was quiet and she sat in Daniel's study surrounded by his letters, she felt profoundly alone. She was 30 years old. She had financial security for the first time in her life. She had meaningful work. She had a purpose, but she didn't have anyone to share it with. Her phone buzzed. Text from Alex. Hey Grace, got a question for you. Can I stop by the office tomorrow? Grace smiled. Sure thing. 10 a.m. work? Perfect. See you then. The next morning, Alex walked into the foundation headquarters looking nervous. He'd filled out since moving into his apartment a year ago. His hair was longer, styled intentionally now. He carried himself with more confidence. What's up? Grace asked, gesturing for him to sit. I wanted to tell you something, Alex said, but I'm afraid you're going to think it's stupid. Try me. I want to become a social worker, like you. I want to help kids like me. Grace felt her throat tighten with emotion. Alex, that's not stupid. That's beautiful. Really? Because everyone keeps telling me I should aim for something more practical. like business or computers or whatever. Who's everyone? My guidance counselor. My aunt. Random people who think they know what's best for me. Alex looked down at his hands. But you helped me when nobody else would. You didn't do it for money or recognition. You did it because it was right. And I want to be that for someone else. Grace leaned forward. Then do it. Apply to social work programs. I'll write you a recommendation letter. Hell, I'll help you pay for school if you need it. Really? Really. Grace smiled. Someone invested in me when I was drowning. I'm just passing it forward. Alex left the office with tears in his eyes and a renewed sense of purpose. And Grace sat at her desk, feeling like maybe, just maybe, this was why Daniel had left her everything. Not just to save her, but to create a ripple effect of love that would extend far beyond either of them. That evening, Grace was in the Foundation's community room setting up for a support group meeting when someone knocked on the door. She opened it to find a man standing on the porch. He was maybe 35, tall, with dark curly hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He held a manila folder in his hands. Can I help you? Grace asked. Are you Grace Holloway? Yes. The man extended his hand. I'm Dr. Michael Torres. I'm a therapist. I work with LGBTQ+ youth in Portland, and I've heard incredible things about your foundation. Grace shook his hand, trying not to notice how warm it was. Would you like to come in? If you have time, yes. They sat in the community room. Michael explained that he'd been looking for an organization to partner with, somewhere he could refer clients who needed more than just therapy, who needed housing, financial support, community. Your foundation is exactly what I've been looking for, Michael said. I'd love to talk about a formal partnership. They spent the next hour discussing logistics. Michael's approach to therapy was holistic, trauma-informed, exactly aligned with the foundation's values. By the end of the conversation, they'd agreed to a pilot partnership program. As Michael was leaving, he paused at the door. Can I ask you something personal? Sure, Grace said. Why did you start this foundation? I mean, I read the story about your uncle in the news article. But what made you decide to build all this? Grace thought about how to answer. Because someone loved me when I didn't know I needed it. And that love saved my life. I wanted to make sure other people got that same chance. Michael nodded, something shifting in his expression. That's the most beautiful thing I've heard in a long time. Over the next 3 months, Michael became a regular presence at the foundation. He came to support group meetings. He provided counseling sessions for the kids in the program. He and Grace worked closely together, developing treatment plans, coordinating care. And slowly, carefully, they became friends. Michael had his own story. He'd grown up in a conservative Catholic family in Texas. When he came out as gay at 19, his family gave him an ultimatum: conversion therapy or exile. He chose exile. He'd put himself through college and grad school, built a career helping LGBTQ+ youth, and never looked back. We have that in common, Grace said one evening. They were sitting in the community room after a particularly intense support group meeting, drinking coffee and decompressing. Family rejection. Michael nodded. My therapist says it creates an interesting psychological pattern. We spend our lives trying to create the family we wish we'd had. Is that what you're doing? Grace asked. Absolutely, Michael said with a slight smile. Every kid I work with, every client I help, I'm trying to be the adult I needed when I was 19 and terrified. That's exactly why I started the foundation, Grace said softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Michael said, Can I ask you something else personal? Depends on the question. Are you seeing anyone? Grace felt her heart skip. No, why? Because I've been trying to work up the courage to ask you out for 2 months now, and I figured I should probably just do it before I lose my nerve completely. Grace stared at him. You want to ask me out? If that's okay. If it's not, we can pretend this conversation never happened and continue being professional colleagues who definitely don't have any feelings for each other. Grace laughed, a real laugh that surprised her. Yes. Yes to pretending this never happened, or yes to the date? Yes to the date. Michael's face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen on him. Really? Really? Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant in Northwest Portland. They talked for 3 hours about their work, their families, their favorite books, their biggest fears. Michael told her about his childhood in Houston, his journey to self-acceptance, his decision to dedicate his life to helping others. Grace told him about Daniel, about the letters, about spending 4 days reading every single one and understanding for the first time what unconditional love looked like. "That's extraordinary," Michael said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Not just what he did, but what you did with it. You could have taken the money and disappeared. Instead, you built something that's changing lives." "I didn't know what else to do with it," Grace said honestly. "It felt like blood money if I just kept it for myself. Like I was profiting from his death." Michael squeezed her hand. "You're honoring his life. There's a difference." By their third date, Grace knew she was falling for him. By the 6th date, they were officially together. And by the time autumn rolled around again, 2 years after that midnight phone call from Richard Castellano, Michael had moved into Daniel's house with Grace. They didn't talk about it as a big decision. Michael just started staying over more nights than not. His toothbrush appeared in the bathroom. His books filled the empty spaces on the shelves. And one day, Grace realized he'd been living there for 2 months and it felt completely natural. "Michael," she said one evening as they cooked dinner together in Daniel's kitchen. "Yeah? Do you want to make this official? Like move in officially?" Michael turned off the stove and faced her. "I thought I already had." "You've been leaving your apartment lease open, because I didn't want to assume." Michael stepped closer to her. "But yes, Grace, I want to live here. With you. If you'll have me." "I'll have you," Grace said and kissed him. That night, lying in bed, Michael asked her something he'd clearly been thinking about for a while. "Have you ever thought about expanding the foundation? Opening other locations?" "Sometimes," Grace admitted. "But it feels overwhelming. We're barely managing one location. What if you didn't have to do it alone?" Michael propped himself up on one elbow. "What if we did it together?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, I could transition my private practice to be part of the foundation. We could open a second location. Maybe in Seattle, where you used to work. We could replicate the model, help even more kids." Grace felt her heart start racing. That would be huge, expensive, risky. "It would be," Michael agreed. "But Grace, you have the resources. You have the model that works. And you have something even more valuable. You have proof that this kind of love changes lives." Grace thought about it. About Daniel's $2.7 million. About how much was left in the foundation accounts. About how many kids were still out there, rejected, alone, needing someone to choose them. "Let's do it," she said. Over the next year, they expanded. They opened a second location in Seattle, then a third in Eugene, then a fourth in Spokane. The Holloway Foundation grew from helping 50 kids a year to helping 200. The staff grew. The budget grew. The impact grew. And through it all, Grace kept Daniel's letters in his study. She read them sometimes when she needed strength or guidance, or just a reminder of why she was doing this. One letter dated July 15, 2003 stuck with her. "Dear Grace, I had a breakthrough with a student today. His name is Marcus, and he's been struggling all semester. Today, something clicked. He turned in an essay that was brilliant, insightful, everything I'd been hoping he could do. After class, I told him how proud I was, and he said something that broke my heart. Nobody's ever told me that before. Grace, can you imagine? 17 years old, and nobody had ever told him they were proud of him. I think that's the work we're supposed to do in this world. Not just teach or help or serve, but see people. Really see them, and tell them they matter. I hope, wherever you are, someone is telling you they're proud of you. Because I am. I'm so proud of the person you're becoming, even though I'll never meet you. Love always. Uncle Daniel. Grace showed the letter to Michael one evening. He's describing what you do every day, Michael said after reading it. seeing people, telling them they matter. It's what he did for me, Grace said, from a distance. For 30 years. I'm just trying to do the same. 3 years after that midnight phone call, the Holloway Foundation held its annual gala. It was a fundraiser, but also a celebration. They'd helped over 400 kids. They had 5 locations across Oregon and Washington. They'd received national recognition for their work. The gala was at a fancy hotel in downtown Portland. Grace wore a dress, the first formal dress she'd owned since college. Michael wore a suit. The room was full of donors, board members, former clients, and Daniel's former students who'd traveled from across the country to celebrate his legacy. Alex was there, now in his first year of social work school. Patricia Chen was there, the student Daniel had helped in 1987. Richard Castellano was there, beaming with pride. And when Grace stepped up to the microphone to give her speech, she felt Daniel's presence like he was standing right beside her. "Thank you all for coming," she began. 3 years ago, I was sitting on my bathroom floor, drowning in debt, completely alone. I was ready to give up. And then I got a phone call that changed my life. She told them about Daniel, about the letters, about a man who'd been rejected by his family but chose to love anyway, about unconditional, selfless, world-changing love. "Daniel never met me," Grace said, her voice breaking. "But he loved me every single day for 30 years. He loved me in silence. He loved me from a distance. He loved me without expecting anything in return. And when he died, he made sure I'd have everything I needed to not just survive, but thrive." Tears streamed down her face now, but she kept going. "This foundation exists because Daniel taught me what real love looks like. It doesn't ask for recognition. It doesn't need to be seen. It just shows up every single day and says, 'I choose you.'" She looked around the room at all the faces, the kids they'd helped, the donors who'd supported them, the staff who'd dedicated themselves to the mission. "We've helped over 400 kids in 3 years. 400 young people who were rejected by their families, but found a place where they were chosen. And every single one of them is Daniel's legacy." The room erupted in applause. Grace stepped down from the podium and walked straight into Michael's arms. "He was incredible," Michael whispered in her ear. "And so are you." That night, after the gala, Grace and Michael drove back to the house. They sat on the front porch, the same porch where Richard Castellano had first told her about Daniel 3 years ago. "Can I tell you something?" Michael said. "Always. I want to marry you." Grace's heart stopped. "What?" "I know it's fast. We've only been together for a year and a half. But Grace, I've never been more sure of anything. You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. The way you love people, the way you show up, the way you turned your pain into purpose. I want to spend the rest of my life loving you the way Daniel loved you. Unconditionally, completely, forever." Grace felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes. Yes, yes, Michael, I want to marry you." He kissed her there on the porch, and Grace thought about Daniel, about how he'd loved from a distance his entire life, about how he'd never married after Margaret died, about how he'd spent 30 years writing letters to someone he'd never meet. And she wished, more than anything, that he could be here to see this, to know that his love had created ripples that extended far beyond what he could have imagined. They got married 6 months later. It was a small ceremony in Daniel's garden, Grace's garden now. Just close friends and family, the foundation staff, some of the kids they'd helped, Daniel's former students. Richard Castellano officiated. And when he asked Grace and Michael to say their vows, Grace pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Michael," she began, her voice steady despite the tears. 3 years ago, I learned about a kind of love I didn't know existed. My Uncle Daniel loved me for 30 years without ever meeting me. He taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about showing up every single day and saying, 'I choose you.'" She took Michael's hands. I choose you, Michael. Today. Tomorrow. For the rest of our lives. I choose to love you the way Daniel loved me. Unconditionally. Completely. Without reservation. I choose to build a life with you that honors his legacy. A life full of purpose, compassion, and the kind of love that changes the world. Michael's vows were simpler, but no less powerful. Grace, you've shown me what it means to turn pain into power, loss into love, grief into grace. I choose you. Always. When they kissed, the small gathering erupted in applause, and Grace looked up at the sky, at the clouds moving across the sun, and whispered, "Thank you, Uncle Daniel." 5 years after that midnight phone call, the Holloway Foundation had expanded to 12 locations across 5 states. They'd helped over 2,000 kids. Grace and Michael had co-authored a book about their work, which had become required reading in social work programs across the country. But the thing Grace was most proud of wasn't the expansion, or the recognition, or even the thousands of lives they'd changed. It was something smaller, more personal. She was pregnant. She and Michael had been trying for over a year, and when the test finally came back positive, they both cried tears of joy and terror. "What if I'm not good enough?" Grace asked Michael late one night, her hand on her still flat stomach. "What if I mess this up?" Michael pulled her close. "You're going to be an amazing mother. You know why?" "Why?" "Because you know what it feels like to be chosen, and you're going to make sure our child feels chosen every single day." When their daughter was born on September 14th, the same day as Grace's birthday, they named her Daniela Margaret Holloway Torres. Daniela for Daniel, Margaret for Daniel's wife. Grace held her daughter in the hospital, this tiny, perfect human who'd somehow chosen to exist, and she thought about Daniel's letters, about 30 years of love that had led to this moment. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to the Holloway Foundation staff. "She's here. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Daniela Margaret. Mom and baby are healthy. And thank you, all of you, for being part of Daniel's legacy." That night, after Michael had fallen asleep in the hospital chair and Daniela was sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, Grace pulled out her journal and wrote, "Dear Uncle Daniel, I had a baby today, your great niece. I named her after you and Margaret because I wanted her to carry your legacy forward. She has your eyes, or at least she has the eyes I see in your photographs. Kind eyes. The kind that really see people. I'm terrified, Uncle Daniel. What if I'm not a good mom? What if I can't give her what she needs? But then I remember what you taught me. Love doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be present. You loved me imperfectly from a distance for 30 years, and it saved my life. So I'm going to love Daniela imperfectly too. I'm going to show up every day. I'm going to choose her every single morning. And I'm going to tell her about you, about the man who loved her mother before she was even born, who built a legacy of unconditional love that continues to ripple out into the world. Thank you, Uncle Daniel, for everything, for the letters, for the money, for the love. But most of all, thank you for teaching me what family really means. It means showing up. It means staying. It means choosing love. Every single day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I love you. Always. Grace." She closed the journal and looked at her sleeping daughter. This tiny human who would grow up knowing Daniel's story. Who would grow up in a house full of love. In a family that chose each other. In a world that was slightly better because one man refused to stop loving. And Grace understood finally what Daniel had known all along. Love doesn't end. It multiplies. It ripples out. It creates more love, which creates more love, which changes the world one person at a time. That was Daniel's gift. Not the money, not the house, not even the letters. His gift was teaching Grace how to love without conditions, without expectations, without limits. And now, as she sat in that hospital room holding her daughter, she knew exactly what she was going to do with that gift. She was going to pass it forward, every single day, for the rest of her life, the way Daniel had done for her. If this story reminded you that love doesn't need to be seen to be powerful, that family is about choice, not blood, and that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we never got to meet, then share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit that like button if you believe that true love chooses you every single day, even from a distance. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that celebrate the extraordinary beauty of unconditional love, quiet sacrifice, and the ripples one person's kindness can create across generations. Because sometimes the darkest moments, sitting alone on a bathroom floor, drowning in debt with nowhere to turn, lead to the most beautiful beginnings. And sometimes, a stranger who loved you from the shadows becomes the foundation for a life you never imagined. This is Grace and Daniel's story. A reminder that real love doesn't need recognition to be real.